A terrified child stood on stage at a local talent show, trying to sing a Neil Diamond song when the audience started throwing tomatoes and booing mercilessly. Just when it seemed like the cruelest moment of the kid's life, Neil Diamond himself walked through that door, and what he did next left everyone speechless and ashamed. You're going to discover how a legendary superstar turned a moment of public humiliation into a life-changing act of kindness, how one child's dream to sing almost died on that stage until a hero showed up, and why this incident reminded the world that true artists don't just create music, they create hope. Stay until the end, because this isn't just a story about defending someone. It's a story about why we should never crush other people's dreams and how one act of compassion can change everything. Westfield, New Jersey, October 1982. The Westfield Community Center was hosting its annual Fall Talent Show, a beloved local tradition that had been running for over 20 years. It was the kind of small-town event where everyone in the community participated. Proud parents filled every seat in the audience, local businesses sponsored prizes, and kids of all ages got their chance to shine on stage. The talent show always attracted a mix of performers: kids who played piano, teenagers who sang popular songs, dance groups from local studios, comedians telling jokes their parents had helped them write, and magicians performing tricks they'd learned from library books. It was wholesome, community-oriented, and usually a night of support and encouragement for young performers finding their voices. But on this particular night, something went terribly wrong. The show had been progressing smoothly through its first dozen acts. There had been a girl who played violin beautifully, twin boys who did a comedy routine that had everyone laughing, a ballet performance that showcased incredible skill for such young dancers, and several popular song covers that the audience enthusiastically sang along with. Everyone was having a wonderful time. Then came act number 13. A 12-year-old boy named Michael Bennett walked onto that stage, and from the moment he appeared, some people in the audience started to snicker. Michael wasn't what you'd call a typical performer. He was overweight, wearing clothes that didn't quite fit right because his family couldn't afford to buy him new ones very often. His thick glasses were held together with tape on one side where they'd been broken and poorly repaired. His hair was messy, not styled like some of the other kids who clearly had parents who knew how to make them look stage-ready. But none of that mattered to Michael. He loved music more than anything in the world, and he had been practicing for this moment for 3 months. He had chosen to sing one of the most iconic songs in American music history, Neil Diamond's classic hit that everyone knew and loved. Michael had practiced in his bedroom every day after school, singing into his hairbrush like it was a microphone, imagining himself on a real stage, performing for a real audience. His mother, a single parent working 2 jobs to keep them afloat, had encouraged his dream, even though she could barely afford the $5 entry fee for the talent show. She had scrounged together enough money to buy him a new shirt for the performance, and Michael wore it with pride, even though it was a size too big and hung awkwardly on his frame. As Michael walked to center stage, the snickering in the audience grew louder. A group of teenage boys in the back row, who had come to the show specifically to make fun of people, started making comments loud enough for people around them to hear. "Look at this kid! What a loser! Is he really going to try to sing? This is going to be hilarious! Someone should stop him before he embarrasses himself." Michael heard them, everyone heard them, but he tried to push the voices out of his mind and focus on why he was there. He loved Neil Diamond's music, loved the emotion and power in those songs, and he wanted to share that love with everyone in the audience. The music teacher who was running the sound system started the backing track, and the opening notes filled the community center. Michael grabbed the microphone, took a deep breath, and began to sing. For the first few lines, Michael actually sounded pretty good. His voice was untrained, a bit shaky from nerves, but there was genuine emotion there. He was pouring his heart into the performance, just like he'd practiced in his bedroom hundreds of times. But then disaster struck. One of the teenage boys in the back row had brought a bag of tomatoes with him, specifically planning to throw them at performers he didn't like. He pulled out the first tomato and with a strong throwing arm developed from playing baseball, hurled it at the stage. The tomato hit Michael square in the chest, exploding on impact and covering his new shirt with red pulp and seeds. Michael stopped singing mid-word, the shock and humiliation visible on his face. The music continued playing, but Michael just stood there, frozen, looking down at the mess on his shirt, and then the others joined in. Several people in the audience, emboldened by the first throw, started laughing. A few more teenagers pulled out tomatoes, because apparently multiple people had planned this cruel attack. Tomatoes started flying at the stage from different directions. Some hit Michael, others hit the floor around him. One hit the microphone stand, knocking it sideways. The laughter grew louder. People were actually enjoying watching this child be humiliated on stage. Michael's eyes filled with tears. His face turned bright red, not just from the tomatoes but from shame and embarrassment. This was supposed to be his moment to shine, his chance to show everyone that he could do something special. And instead, it had become the worst moment of his young life. He turned to run off stage, wanting nothing more than to disappear, to never show his face in this town again. His mother, sitting in the third row, was already standing up, tears streaming down her face, wanting to go to her son but not sure what to do. The music teacher rushed to stop the backing track, and several adults in the audience were starting to stand up to confront the teenagers who were throwing tomatoes. But then something happened that nobody expected. The back doors of the community center burst open, and a man walked in. At first, nobody recognized him because it was dark and the lighting was all focused on the stage. But as he walked down the center aisle toward the front, moving with purpose and determination, people started to realize who it was. Neil Diamond, the actual real Neil Diamond, was walking into this small-town talent show in Westfield, New Jersey. The throwing stopped immediately. The laughter died. The entire room went silent, except for the sound of Neil Diamond's footsteps as he walked toward the stage. People couldn't believe what they were seeing. Neil Diamond was one of the biggest stars in the world in 1982. He had sold millions of records, performed in the largest venues on earth, and was treated like royalty wherever he went. What was he doing in a small community center in New Jersey on a random Tuesday night in October? The answer, as it turned out, was both simple and extraordinary. Neil had been visiting his elderly aunt who lived in Westfield. He was in town incognito, just a quiet family visit, and he'd heard about the local talent show from his aunt, who was friends with one of the organizers. On a whim, curious to see local talent and maybe reconnect with the kind of small-town America he'd grown up in himself, Neil had decided to drop by. He'd been standing in the back of the room for the past 30 minutes, watching the various acts and enjoying the wholesome community atmosphere. And then he had watched Michael Bennett walk onto that stage, had seen the cruelty begin, had witnessed the tomatoes flying and the laughter, and something inside Neil Diamond had snapped. He had spent his entire career believing in the power of music to bring people together, to lift people up, to give hope and joy. And here was a child, a kid who obviously loved music as much as Neil himself did, being torn down and humiliated just for having the courage to try. Neil couldn't stand by and watch it happen, so he walked down that aisle, climbed onto that stage, and went straight to Michael, who was still standing there, frozen in shock and covered in tomato. Neil put his hand on Michael's shoulder and looked at him with kind eyes. "What's your name, son?" he asked gently. Michael could barely speak. He was staring at Neil Diamond, his hero, the man whose music he'd been trying to sing, standing right next to him. "Michael," he stammered. "It's Michael, sir." Neil smiled. "Michael, I heard you singing before those people interrupted you. And you know what? You've got a good voice. You've got feeling. You were putting your heart into it, And that's what matters most in music. Don't let anyone tell you different." Then Neil turned to face the audience, and his expression changed. The kindness he'd shown Michael was replaced by something harder, something that made it clear he was not happy with what he'd just witnessed. "I want everyone in this room to listen to me very carefully," Neil said, his voice carrying to every corner of the community center without needing amplification. "I don't know who threw those tomatoes. I don't know who was laughing. But I want you to understand something. That boy standing next to me, Michael, he did something incredibly brave tonight. He got up on this stage in front of all of you and tried to share something he loves. Do you know how much courage that takes? Do you have any idea how scary it is to stand in front of people and perform?" The room was dead silent. People who had been laughing moments ago were now looking down at their laps in shame. Music is precious. It's vulnerable. When someone sings, they're sharing a piece of their soul with you. And what did you do? You attacked him. You tried to destroy something beautiful before it even had a chance to bloom. You should all be ashamed of yourselves. Neil's words hit hard because they were true. Adults in the audience realized their kids had been part of this cruelty. Parents who had been laughing along realized they were setting terrible examples. Everyone felt the weight of what they'd done. "Now, I'll tell you what's going to happen," Neil continued. "Michael is going to finish his song, and you're all going to listen respectfully. You're going to give him the courtesy and respect that every performer deserves. And if anyone, and I mean anyone, tries to interrupt again, you'll answer to me. Is that clear?" Heads nodded throughout the audience. Nobody dared to argue with Neil Diamond. Neil turned back to Michael. "Are you ready to try again?" he asked. Michael's eyes were still full of tears, but something had changed in his expression. "I don't know if I can do it," he whispered. "My shirt is ruined, and everyone already heard me mess up." "You didn't mess up," Neil said firmly. "You were interrupted. There's a difference. And who cares about the shirt? Some of my best performances have been when things went wrong. It's not about being perfect. It's about being real." He smiled. "Tell you what, how about if I sing it with you? Would that help?" Michael's eyes went wide. You'd sing with me. But it's your song. You're Neil Diamond." "Exactly. It's my song. And I'm telling you it's okay to sing it. More than okay, I want to hear your version of it. Every person brings something different to a song, makes it their own. So let's do this together, you and me, and show everyone here what music is really about." Neil turned to the music teacher, who was still standing by the sound system looking shocked. "Can you start that track again from the beginning?" The music teacher nodded frantically and restarted the backing track. The opening notes filled the room once more. Neil stood next to Michael, put his arm around the boy's shoulder, and together they began to sing. Michael's voice was shaky at first, understandably so after what he'd just been through. But Neil's voice was strong and confident, carrying both of them through the first verse, and as they sang together, something magical started to happen. Michael's voice grew stronger. The fear and shame began to melt away, replaced by pure joy. He was singing with Neil Diamond, his hero, on stage in front of his whole community. His voice found its rhythm, found its power, and by the time they reached the chorus, Michael was singing with everything he had. And Neil, one of the greatest performers in the world, stepped back slightly, letting Michael's voice take center stage. He was still singing, still providing harmony and support, but he was making sure everyone in that audience heard Michael, heard this brave kid who had refused to give up, even when the world tried to knock him down. The audience was transfixed. Every single person in that room was watching this 12-year-old boy covered in tomato, standing next to a legend, singing his heart out. Some people were crying, moved by the beauty of the moment and ashamed of their earlier behavior. Others were smiling, witnessing something they would remember for the rest of their lives. When they reached the final chorus, the entire audience joined in. Hundreds of voices united in song, singing along with Michael and Neil, transforming what had been a moment of cruelty into a moment of community and celebration. The song built to its emotional climax, and when the final note faded away, there was a moment of complete silence. And then the community center erupted in the loudest, most enthusiastic applause that had ever been heard in that building. 500 people rose to their feet, screaming, cheering, applauding with every ounce of energy they had. Michael stood there, overwhelmed, unable to process what had just happened. Neil Diamond pulled him into a hug, and the image of this legend embracing a tomato-covered kid became one of the most iconic moments in Westfield's history. Let me ask you a question I want you to answer in the comments. Have you ever been bullied or humiliated for trying something you loved? How did you find the courage to keep going? Share your story, because I think we can all learn from each other's experiences. When the applause finally died down, Neil spoke to the audience one more time. I want everyone here, especially the young people, to remember this night. Remember that when someone tries something brave, you support them, you encourage them, even if they're not perfect, because nobody starts out perfect. Every great performer you've ever admired started out as a beginner, nervous and uncertain, hoping someone would give them a chance. He looked directly at the back row, where the teenage boys who had thrown the tomatoes were sitting. And to those of you who threw tomatoes tonight, I want you to know that what you did was wrong. But I also want you to know that people can change, people can learn, and people can do better. So I'm not going to call you out individually or get you in trouble. Instead, I'm going to give you a challenge. I want you to find something you care about, something you're willing to be vulnerable for, and I want you to pursue it. And when you do, I hope someone treats you better than you treated Michael tonight. The teenagers looked genuinely ashamed. Several of them would later apologize to Michael privately, and one of them would become his friend, forever changed by what Neil Diamond had said that night. Neil turned to Michael one more time. You've got real talent, kid. Don't let anyone take that away from you. Keep singing, keep practicing, and don't ever give up on your dreams. Then Neil did something that nobody expected. He took off his jacket, an expensive leather jacket that was probably worth more than Michael's family made in 3 months, and put it around Michael's shoulders, covering the tomato-stained shirt. Keep this, Neil said. When you look at it, remember tonight. Remember that you were brave enough to get on this stage and sing, and remember that your hero believes in you. Michael started crying again, but this time they were tears of joy. He hugged Neil Diamond tight, this man who had saved him from the worst moment of his life and turned it into the best. Neil stayed for the rest of the talent show, sitting in the front row, applauding enthusiastically for every single performer who came after Michael. His presence changed the entire energy of the event. Suddenly, everyone was supportive, everyone was encouraging, everyone remembered what the talent show was supposed to be about, celebrating people who were brave enough to share their gifts with the community. After the show, there was a long line of people wanting to meet Neil, to thank him for coming, to apologize for what had happened. Neil was gracious with everyone, but he spent the most time with Michael and his mother. Michael's mother couldn't stop thanking Neil through her tears. You don't know what you did for my son tonight, she said. He's been bullied at school, he doesn't have many friends, and music is the one thing that makes him happy. I was so afraid that what happened tonight would make him give up on his dreams. But you saved him. You saved his love of music. Neil knelt down so he was at eye level with Michael. Listen to me, Michael. You're going to face challenges in life. People are going to doubt you, criticize you, maybe even try to hurt you. But if you keep that passion for music alive, if you keep working and believing in yourself, nothing can stop you. And remember, I believe in you. Neil Diamond believes in you. Don't forget that. The story of what happened that night spread quickly through Westfield and beyond. By the next day, it was in local newspapers. By the end of the week, national media had picked it up. "Neil Diamond saves child from cruel audience," read one headline. "Legend stops bullying at talent show," read another. The coverage was overwhelmingly positive, praising Neil for his compassion and his willingness to use his status to defend someone who couldn't defend themselves. But Neil himself didn't want credit for what he did. In an interview a few weeks later, he said, "I didn't do anything special. I just did what anyone with a heart should do. You don't let kids get torn down for trying. You don't let cruelty win. It's that simple." The teenagers who had thrown the tomatoes faced consequences. Their parents, mortified by their children's behavior, made them write apology letters to Michael, perform community service, and attend sessions with a counselor about bullying and empathy. The community center also implemented new rules for future talent shows, including a zero-tolerance policy for harassment of performers. But the biggest impact was on Michael Bennett himself. That night changed the trajectory of his entire life. Instead of giving up on music, he dove even deeper into it. He took voice lessons using scholarship money that the community raised for him after the incident. He joined the school choir and theater program. He practiced every single day, driven by the memory of Neil Diamond standing next to him on that stage, believing in him. 4 years later, when Michael was 16, he auditioned for a performing arts high school in New York City and was accepted with a full scholarship. His audition piece was the same song he had sung that night with Neil Diamond, and when the judges asked why he chose it, he told them the whole story. They were moved to tears and said that anyone with that kind of resilience and passion deserved a chance. Michael went on to attend Juilliard, one of the most prestigious performing arts schools in the world. He became a professional singer, performing in Broadway shows and later releasing his own albums. He never became as famous as Neil Diamond, but he built a successful career doing what he loved, inspiring others through music, just like Neil had inspired him. Every year on the anniversary of that night in October 1982, Michael would perform at the Westfield Community Center, returning to the place where his dream almost died and instead was saved. He would tell the story to the audience, making sure young performers understood that failure and criticism are part of the journey, but passion and perseverance can overcome anything. In 1995, 13 years after that fateful night, Michael released his first album. He sent a copy to Neil Diamond with a letter that read, "Dear Mr. Diamond, you probably don't remember me. I was the 12-year-old kid covered in tomatoes that you saved at a talent show in Westfield, New Jersey. I want you to know that you changed my life that night. You showed me that one person standing up for what's right can make all the difference. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. This album exists because of you. Thank you for being my hero. Love, Michael Bennett." 2 weeks later, Michael received a package. Inside was a handwritten note from Neil Diamond and a gold record. The note read, "Michael, of course I remember you. I think about that night often. It reminded me why I do what I do, to bring people together, to lift them up, to show them that music can heal and unite. I'm so proud of you for not giving up, for pursuing your passion, and for becoming the artist you were meant to be. This gold record is from one of my albums. I want you to have it as a reminder that you inspired me just as much as I inspired you. Your friend, Neil." Michael framed that note and hung it in his home studio where he could see it every day. The gold record hung next to it. On days when the music industry was hard, when rejection letters piled up, when he questioned whether he was good enough, he would look at those items and remember that night in October 1982, when Neil Diamond showed him what it meant to be brave, to believe, and to never give up. The community of Westfield never forgot that night either. The Westfield Community Center eventually dedicated a plaque commemorating the event. It hangs in the lobby where everyone can see it, and it reads, "On this stage in October 1982, Neil Diamond showed us that defending the dreams of others is the highest calling of any artist. May we always remember to lift each other up, never tear each other down." Schools in the area started using the story as part of their anti-bullying curriculum. Teachers would tell students about Michael Bennett and Neil Diamond, using it as an example of how one person's courage to stand up against cruelty can change everything. The teenage boys who had thrown the tomatoes, now adults, have all spoken publicly about that night and how it changed them. One of them became a teacher who makes it his mission to encourage every student, no matter how unconventional their dreams might seem. Another became a counselor who works with at-risk youth, helping them find constructive ways to express themselves. They all credit that night and the way Neil Diamond handled it with teaching them about empathy, redemption, and the power of kindness. Neil Diamond himself, when asked about it in interviews over the years, always speaks about that night with fondness. "That was one of the most important performances of my career," he said in a 2001 interview. "Not because of the music, but because of what it represented. We have a responsibility as artists, as people with platforms, to use those platforms for good, to defend those who can't defend themselves, to show young people that their dreams matter, that they matter." He continued, "And you know what I learned that night? I learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do isn't perform for thousands of people in a stadium. Sometimes it's standing next to one scared kid in a small-town community center and showing him that he's not alone. That's real power. That's real impact." In 2008, 26 years after that night, Michael Bennett organized a special concert in Westfield to benefit the community center's arts programs. He had become successful enough that he could afford to put on a free show for the town that had once almost destroyed his dreams, but had also given him the opportunity to be saved by his hero. The concert was packed. People came from all over New Jersey to attend, and in the middle of the show, Michael stopped and told the story one more time, making sure a new generation understood what had happened on that stage decades earlier. And then, as a surprise to everyone, including Michael himself, Neil Diamond walked onto that stage. He had heard about the concert and decided to attend, to see what had become of the boy he'd helped all those years ago. When Michael saw Neil, he broke down crying right there on stage. The two men embraced, and the audience gave them a standing ovation that lasted for 5 full minutes. They sang together again that night, performing the same song they had performed in 1982. But this time, there were no tomatoes, no cruel laughter, only respect, appreciation, and love. After the song, Neil spoke to the audience. "This man standing next to me is proof that if you believe in someone, if you give them a chance, if you defend them when others try to tear them down, incredible things can happen." Michael could have given up that night in 1982. Nobody would have blamed him. But he didn't. He took the pain, the humiliation, and he transformed it into fuel for his dreams. That's true strength. That's true artistry. Michael took the microphone. "I want every young person here to know that your dreams are valid. It doesn't matter if people mock you, if they think you're weird, if they don't understand why you love what you love. Keep going. Find your Neil Diamond, the person who believes in you, and let their belief help you believe in yourself. And if you can't find that person, be that person for someone else." The incident in Westfield became part of music history folklore, a reminder of both the worst and best of human nature. It showed how quickly people can turn cruel, how mob mentality can make individuals do things they would never do alone. But it also showed that one person standing up for what's right can stop that cruelty in its tracks, can transform a moment of darkness into a moment of light. Over the years, countless young performers facing their own moments of doubt and criticism have drawn strength from this story. They remember that if Neil Diamond believed in a tomato-covered kid with a voice that wasn't perfect, then maybe they deserve a chance too. The story has been referenced in motivational speeches, included in books about perseverance and kindness, and featured in documentaries about anti-bullying efforts. It's bigger than just Michael Bennett and Neil Diamond now. It's a symbol of hope for anyone who's ever been told they're not good enough, that their dreams are stupid, that they should just give up. Michael Bennett is in his mid-50s now and still performing. He teaches music to underprivileged kids, paying forward the kindness that was shown to him. He tells his students about that night in October 1982, and he makes sure they understand the lesson. Your dreams matter. Your voice matters. And no matter how many tomatoes life throws at you, keep singing. Neil Diamond, now 84 years old and retired from touring due to Parkinson's disease, still keeps in touch with Michael. They talk on the phone occasionally, and Neil always asks about Michael's students, always encourages him to keep teaching, keep inspiring, keep showing young people that music can change lives. In a recent interview, Michael was asked what advice he would give to young performers facing criticism. His answer was simple: remember that criticism comes from people who aren't brave enough to do what you're doing. They sit in the audience and throw tomatoes because they're too scared to get on the stage themselves. Don't let their fear stop your courage. And remember, somewhere out there is your Neil Diamond, the person who will stand up for you when you need it most. And someday you'll be someone else's Neil Diamond, defending their dreams when the world tries to destroy them. Now let me ask you one more question for the comments. If you had been in that audience in 1982, what would you have done? Would you have stood up against the cruelty before Neil arrived, or would you have stayed silent? Be honest with yourself and share your thoughts, because these conversations matter. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the importance of defending others and never giving up on your dreams, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss future stories about moments that changed lives and lessons that matter. Thank you for watching until the end. Remember that we all have the power to be someone's hero, to stand up against cruelty, to defend the dreams of others. Remember that your voice matters, your dreams matter, and no amount of tomatoes can stop you if you refuse to give up. The night Neil Diamond saved Michael Bennett wasn't just about one boy and one song. It was about all of us, about the choice we make every day to either build people up or tear them down. Choose wisely. Choose kindness. Choose to be someone's Neil Diamond.